I was carrying a tray of champagne flutes into the living room when I heard my daughter laugh. Not the kind of laugh that bubbles up from joy. This one was sharp, dismissive, the kind that slices through walls. And it was followed by 6 words that stopped me cold. It's better than Mom's old shack.
A beat.
Laughter. Her fiancé's mother gasped, then smirked. Her best friend giggled, nudging Taylor's arm like she'd just told the best joke at a dinner party. But to me, it felt like the floor dropped out from under my feet. I stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, my hands gripping the silver tray so hard my knuckles turned white. The glasses clinked together, a high-pitched tremble that betrayed the stillness in my face. I didn't drop them. I didn't scream. I just stared at the back of my daughter's head, her silky blonde hair cascading down the custom lace dress I had offered to alter for her before she told me not to embarrass her with homemade stitches. At the pearls on her ears, ones I had given her on her 18th birthday, passed down from my own mother. At the room, my living room, where every wall had been painted by my hands, every beam laid with sweat and calluses. Where we used to dance in socks on Christmas morning. Where she took her first steps, clutching my fingers, squealing with pride. Now she sat there, surrounded by champagne and curated florals, treating me like a prop in the backdrop of her real life. I took a slow breath and walked into the room. No one noticed me at first. Not the future in-laws, sipping sparkling rose like it was oxygen. Not the women in cream and blush, oohing and awing at the latest expensive gift. Not even Taylor, who was too busy admiring a framed rendering of her future home, a modern, cold glass structure near the coast that looked like it belonged in an architectural magazine, not a family photo album. I placed the tray down on the coffee table.
Gently. Carefully.
Then I straightened, folded my hands in front of me, and waited. Someone finally saw me. It was her fiancé's mother, Barbara. She glanced at my modest navy dress, then let her eyes flick to the tray of champagne. "Oh," she said with a sugary smile. "How helpful. Thank you, Lorraine." Lorraine. Not Mom. Not even Mrs. Danner. Just my first name, spoken like I was the hired help. Before I could respond, Taylor turned to me. Her face flushed, not from shame, but from celebration. "Mom," she said brightly, "I was just telling them how excited I am to move into the new place. It's finally happening. Real space. Real design. No more, you know." She gestured vaguely toward the walls. I kept my voice steady. "No more what?" She blinked, tilted her head. Then, in front of everyone, she smiled and said, "No more creaky floors and patchwork furniture. No more rustic cabin-in-the-woods vibes. No more antique everything." Someone chuckled. Another muttered. She said it. Taylor beamed. "We're moving forward, Mom. You should be happy for me." And that's when I felt it, the shift. That split second when a mother becomes something else. An inconvenience. An afterthought. A museum relic someone wants to walk away from politely. I didn't say a word. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply turned and walked out the front door. The late spring air hit my face like a slap.
Warm. Alive. Real.
I stood on the porch, listening to the muffled chatter inside my home. My hands trembled slightly, but I refused to let them clench. Instead, I walked down the steps barefoot, my heels left behind on the entryway mat, and crossed the gravel path toward the side garden. The same garden I built for Taylor when she was 9. She wanted fairy lights and a wishing well. I gave her both. She wanted lavender and roses. I spent 2 weeks digging through clay soil to make it happen. She wanted a pink-painted bench to write her stories on. I stayed up all night sanding it so she wouldn't get splinters. Now, she called it a shack. And no one corrected her. No one said, "But your mother built this with her hands, after your father died, while raising you alone." Because no one knew. Not really. They knew Taylor. They knew the version of her that wore heels worth more than my monthly income. They knew the girl who hosted parties with ice sculptures and calligraphied menus. They didn't know the girl who once slept on a mattress on the floor next to me during thunderstorms. The girl who wore hand-me-down shoes until I could save enough for new ones. They didn't know me, and they didn't care to. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't losing my daughter. I had already lost her. She had crossed over into someone else's world, one built on gloss and money and inheritance, and she was determined to leave mine behind like a dust-covered box in the attic. But here's the part she didn't know. Here's the part that would sting. The house. This house she mocked, it wasn't hers anymore. Not legally. Not in any will. Not in any plan. Because 3 weeks ago, I had changed everything. Every document. Every deed. And given it all to someone else. Someone who understood its value. Someone who still believed in memory. Someone who remembered me. Taylor had no idea what was coming. But she would. And when she did, she wouldn't be laughing. She'd be standing in the middle of this shack, surrounded by silence, and she'd realize I wasn't just her mother. I was the one who built everything she stood on. And now I was walking away. Before we continue, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to more powerful stories like this one. The next morning, the house was still. Quiet in the kind of way that doesn't feel peaceful, just empty. Taylor had left the night before, without saying goodbye. I heard her heels on the gravel as she stomped toward her fiancé's car. She didn't even look back. Not once. I didn't stop her. I sat at the kitchen table long after she was gone, staring at the grooves in the wood. I had sanded this table down myself after her father died. I remember Taylor sitting across from me at 6 years old, coloring between the cracks while I tried to balance a budget that barely held together. She used to draw houses. Big ones, small ones. Some with turrets and stained glass, some with picket fences and tiny swing sets. No matter what she drew, she always wrote the same thing at the top of the page. For me and Mommy. Now that little girl was gone. And the woman who took her place? She didn't see me anymore. I was part of the background, like wallpaper. Familiar, aged, and meant to be peeled off when the room needed upgrading. But the woman I had been, she wasn't gone. She had just been quiet. Too quiet for too long. That morning, I opened my file cabinet and pulled out the manila envelope with the legal paperwork. The house title, the notarized will, the updated beneficiary forms, and at the very top, the document Taylor didn't know existed. A deed of transfer.
Signed. Sealed. Done.
The house, every inch of it, from the foundation to the rusted wind chimes on the back porch, no longer belonged to her. It now belonged to someone who still called it home. His name was Miguel, and he wasn't blood, but he was family. I met Miguel 5 years ago at the library downtown. I had started volunteering there once a week to keep myself busy. Taylor had moved out, and the silence in the house had started to feel like it was swallowing me. Miguel was 17 then, always tucked away in the corner with a pile of books on engineering and construction. I noticed him right away because he'd always put the chairs back in perfect alignment when he left. Most kids didn't bother. One afternoon, I offered him a muffin I had brought from home. He looked startled, like no one had offered him anything in a while. He said thank you so softly I almost didn't hear it. That was the beginning. Over the next year, I learned bits and pieces of his story. His mom worked 2 jobs. His dad was gone. He lived in a rundown apartment and sometimes skipped meals to make sure his little sister had enough. But he never complained. He never asked for help. He reminded me of someone.
Me.
One rainy night, I offered him a ride home after the library closed. The streets were slick and he had no umbrella. He hesitated, then got in. When I dropped him off, I saw the building. Mold on the outside walls. No porch light. A broken railing. That night, I sat in my car a long time after he'd gone inside. And I realized something. Taylor had everything growing up. Birthdays with handmade cakes, Halloween costumes sewn from scratch, a warm house full of stories and songs. And Miguel? Miguel had nothing. But he still showed up. Still studied. Still dreamed. So one day, I made him a key. Just a spare. Just in case. I told him he could stop by any time he needed a place to breathe. I didn't expect him to use it. But he did. Not right away. But slowly. a sandwich here, a few hours on the couch there. He'd sit on the back porch and sketch out blueprints in a notebook while I made dinner. Always quiet, always grateful, never entitled, never cruel. Taylor met him once. It was last Thanksgiving. He had dropped off a thank you note and a small gift, handmade soap he'd bought with his weekend job wages. She saw him and said, "Oh, is he one of your pet projects now?" I remember the way Miguel flushed. The way he smiled, small and apologetic, like he was the one who'd done something wrong. Taylor didn't even thank him for the soap. She just walked past, phone in hand, making a joke to someone on the other end of the line about how I was always collecting strays. She didn't even see the rage on my face. But Miguel did. He just placed the soap on the table and said, "It's okay. Some people only see what they want to." Last year, he got into an apprenticeship with a sustainable architecture firm. He was the youngest in the program. When I told him I was proud, he said, "I couldn't have done any of this without you." But the truth? I didn't give him much. Just a roof, some quiet space, and the belief that he was worth showing up for. Sometimes, that's all someone needs to start blooming. So when I sat down with my lawyer 3 weeks ago and changed the house deed, I didn't flinch. I didn't hesitate. Because I had already made my choice. Taylor may have had my blood, but Miguel? Miguel had my heart. And he never made me feel like I was less. So this house, this shack she laughed at, it would never be hers again. Not after what she said. Not after what she became. And when she finds out, she'll realize she didn't just lose a house. She lost a legacy. Because I wasn't giving away wood and nails. I was giving away everything I had built with love. It was 2 weeks later when the knock came. Sharp, repetitive, entitled. I knew it was Taylor before I even stood up from the kitchen table. No one else knocks like they're ringing a bell in their own castle. The house was quiet, just as it had been for the past few days. Except now, I felt peace inside it instead of dread. Miguel had stopped by the night before to help fix the screen door. He'd left a fresh loaf of banana bread on the counter with a sticky note that said, "Extra walnuts. Just how you like it." And now Taylor was banging on the door like she was ready to tear it off the hinges. I opened it. She pushed right past me. Not a word of hello. Not a glance around the house. Just heels stabbing the hardwood floors like a threat. Her hair was pulled into a high bun, sleek and perfect. Her lips were painted in a deep red that used to mean she wanted control. "Taylor," I said softly, "it's early." She spun on me, eyes wild. "I just got off the phone with Roger." Roger, my lawyer. She didn't say his name like she knew him. She said it like she owned him. He wouldn't tell me anything, but he said I wasn't listed on the deed anymore. She crossed her arms. "What's going on, Mom?" I held her gaze. "Exactly what you just said." She blinked. "Excuse me? You're not on the deed anymore." Her mouth opened and closed like a faucet stuck between drips. "I changed it," I said evenly. "A few weeks ago." "You changed it?" Her voice hit a pitch she used to reserve for tantrums at age 10. "You took me off the house? You can't do that. This is my inheritance." I stayed calm. "It's my house, Taylor."
Still is.
"Until I'm gone." "But it was always supposed to be mine." She gestured to the walls like they offended her. "You said you were leaving it to me. And you said it was a shack." Her face flushed crimson. "I didn't mean that." "Yes, you did," I replied. "You said it in a room full of strangers, and you laughed while doing it." "I was joking. You humiliated me." She scoffed. "So this is revenge? Because your feelings got hurt at a party?" "No," I said, stepping closer. "This is accountability. There's a difference." She was pacing now, stomping across the living room, circling the furniture like she was inspecting damage. She picked up a photo off the mantel, one of us from when she was 7, both of us in aprons, flour on our cheeks. "You're being dramatic," she said. "You're going to regret this. You're giving away our family home to what? Some boy you met at a library." I didn't flinch. Her voice dropped, quieter now, sharp like a knife being sheathed slowly. "To someone who isn't even family." That did it. I stepped forward, voice steel. Do not speak about Miguel like that. She raised an eyebrow. So it's true. It's true, I said. He's the one I gave the house to. She shook her head like she couldn't compute the sentence. You're giving him my house?
No.
I'm giving him my house. The one I built. The one I raised you in. The one you outgrew not because of its size, but because of your pride. She was breathing hard now, arms folded tight across her chest, trying to hold in the explosion she didn't realize had already happened. Do you know how this will look? She hissed. What people will think. My fiancé's parents will be horrified. Let them be, I said. They already think we're weird, she snapped. That you're some backwoods woman who still bakes from scratch and wears thrift store cardigans. I smiled, slow and sad. And you agreed with them. That stopped her. She looked down, then away. I'm not angry, Taylor, I added gently. Not even anymore. I'm just done being erased. She looked up. Her voice cracked. I'm your daughter. I know. Then why would you give it to him? I looked around the house. At the window I fixed last fall. At the oak table with its scars and burn marks from birthday candles. At the quiet that had once felt like loss but now felt like peace. And then I said, because he still sees me. She didn't speak for a long time after that. She sat on the edge of the couch like she didn't know how to belong there anymore. I didn't offer her tea. I didn't offer her comfort. I just let the silence say the things she didn't want to hear. When she finally stood up, her eyes were glossy. I thought we were close, she said. I thought you loved me. I nodded. I do. But love doesn't mean I let you treat me like I don't matter. She left without another word. No slamming doors. No screaming. Just the sound of her heels clicking down the path like a metronome counting off the end of something. I stood in the doorway and watched her go. Not with satisfaction. Not with triumph. But with clarity. Because what she didn't realize was that I didn't do this to punish her. I did it to save myself. Miguel didn't hear her coming. He was crouched in the garden behind the shed, tending to the tomato plants we'd started 2 springs ago. The sun was low, casting long gold shadows over the dirt, and he was humming to himself, soft, steady, like the world was finally quiet enough to breathe. Then a voice sliced through the stillness. So it's true. He turned sharply. Taylor was standing at the edge of the yard, arms crossed, her designer sandals sinking into the soil like they didn't belong. She didn't wait for him to answer. I just came from the house, she said coldly. My mother confirmed it. She gave it to you. Miguel stood slowly. He was taller than her, but he didn't tower. He never used his size to intimidate. He just stood with that calm, steady posture I had come to rely on. He wiped his hands on his jeans. She told me she was going to. You accepted it? Taylor asked, voice rising. You actually said yes? Miguel's brow furrowed, as if the answer was obvious. Of course I did. Her laugh was dry. Unbelievable. You've known her what, a few years? And now you get everything? He looked confused. I didn't take anything, she offered. Taylor stepped forward, eyes flashing. She offered you my inheritance. The house I grew up in. The house that was supposed to be mine. Miguel's jaw tensed. I didn't ask for it, Taylor. I never would have asked. But you didn't say no. Silence. I was there when she was alone, he said softly. You weren't. I was the one who helped her fix the roof last winter. I'm the one who checks in when the power goes out, when the faucet leaks, when the porch light flickers. Where were you? I was building my life. Miguel's voice was calm, but firm. So was she. Taylor stepped even closer. You don't deserve what she gave you. Miguel's eyes didn't move. Then maybe you never understood what she actually gave you. They stood there, locked in a silence that felt like a storm waiting to break. You know what this looks like, right? She finally said. Some charity project. A pity handout. You're not even family. Miguel's face remained still, but something in his eyes went distant. I don't need to be blood to be family, he said. She treated me like a son long before she gave me anything. Taylor flinched. He took a breath. But maybe that's the part that bothers you. She blinked, caught off guard. That she needed someone else, he continued. That she found love, loyalty, and presence in someone who wasn't you. And maybe deep down, you know why. Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she had no comeback. Just a tremble in her jaw she didn't want to show. You have no idea what I've sacrificed, she muttered. Miguel tilted his head. Then maybe you should have told her instead of treating her like she was beneath you. That was the moment Taylor broke. It didn't look like a meltdown. It looked like a girl who had just realized the ground beneath her wasn't solid anymore. Like a woman who had spent years looking down on the person who built her world, only to discover that someone else had quietly become the foundation. I don't get it, she whispered. She was always so obsessed with me. Every dance recital, every science fair, every little moment, she was always there. Always giving. And now, suddenly, I'm nothing to her. Miguel stepped closer. You're not nothing. You're just not the center of her world anymore. She looked up at him. Do you know what it feels like to be replaced? His expression softened then. And what he said next, none of us were ready for. Yes. Later that evening, Miguel showed up at my door. He looked shaken. More than that, haunted. I was just finishing dinner. Nothing fancy. Pasta, garlic bread, a salad I'd barely touched. Everything okay? I asked, seeing his face. He hesitated, then stepped inside. She came to see me. I nodded. I figured she might. I didn't want to be cruel, he said. But she needed to hear it. She needed to feel what she made you feel. She did, I said quietly. And now she's feeling something else. Something she doesn't have words for yet. Miguel sat down at the table, slowly. He looked exhausted. And then, without prompting, he said something I hadn't expected. My mom left when I was 13. I looked at him. He'd never told me that. She said she was going to the store, he continued, and never came back. I waited on the porch for hours. My sister cried until she threw up. We didn't know what to do. I reached across the table and placed my hand on his. That's why I never asked for anything, he said. Because I learned real early that nothing was promised. Not love. Not safety. Not even a goodbye. I squeezed his hand. But you gave me something I didn't think I'd ever have again. A home. A place where I wasn't in the way. You were never in the way, I whispered. He looked up, eyes glassy. That house saved me. You saved me. I didn't speak. There was nothing I could say that would mean more than hearing that from him. But deep down, I knew the truth. It wasn't just the house I gave away. It was a second chance. For someone who still believed in what it meant to stay. 3 days passed with no word from Taylor. The house was still. Miguel came by once to check the porch light again. He didn't mention her visit. Neither did I. We both knew the silence that followed a storm could be more dangerous than the thunder itself. I spent the next afternoon going through the old cedar chest in the hallway. The one filled with baby clothes, photographs, and crayon drawings folded so many times the creases had become permanent. I wasn't feeling nostalgic. I was taking stock of what mattered, of what didn't anymore. I was folding up a faded yellow onesie when I heard the knock. Not a bang, not a demand, just 3 firm, confident taps. I stood slowly, and when I opened the door, I saw her and him. Taylor stood on the porch, arms crossed, chin lifted. Her hair was perfectly curled, her expression cold and polished. Beside her stood a man in a charcoal gray suit, thin glasses, leather briefcase. The kind of man who didn't smile unless he billed for it. Taylor spoke first. Mom, this is Jonathan Knox. He's our family attorney. Our? I looked the man up and down. He offered a stiff nod, then cleared his throat like he was about to deliver a verdict. Mrs. Danner, I was hoping we could speak about the recent transfer of your property. There are some concerns. I didn't step aside. You brought a lawyer to my doorstep, I said flatly. I'm just making sure everything was done fairly, Taylor replied. There's a lot at stake. My jaw tightened. There's only one thing at stake. Your pride. Jonathan spoke again. Miss Danner feels this decision may have been made under undue influence. I blinked. Undo what? Taylor stepped forward. You're not thinking clearly, Mom. You've been under stress. You've been isolated. You gave away an entire home to someone who isn't even related to us. It's not logical. And what would be logical, Taylor? Keeping it in the family so you can flip it for a down payment on that Malibu glass box you drooled over. Her eyes narrowed. I earned that house. No, I said sharply. You inherited my love, my labor, my sacrifices. And then you mocked it.
Mocked me.
And now you're standing on my porch with a man in a suit because you didn't get what you thought was promised to you. Mom, don't make this ugly, she hissed. I'm trying to give you a chance to fix this before we file anything. File what? I snapped. A lawsuit? Against your own mother? She hesitated. But Jonathan didn't. We're considering petitioning the court to reverse the deed transfer, he said, adjusting his cuffs, on the grounds that Mr. Santiago may have unduly influenced your decision. It's a common legal approach when large gifts are given outside the family. Miguel. They were going after Miguel. I felt something inside me shift. The soft sadness that had taken up residence in my chest hardened into steel. You think he manipulated me? I asked, voice deadly calm. We're simply questioning the validity of. He was the only person who visited me last Christmas, I said, cutting him off. While your client was skiing in Aspen. He's the one who called the plumber when the water heater burst. While your client ignored 3 voicemails. He's the one who held my hand after my last doctor's appointment, when I cried in the car for 20 minutes because I was scared I might have cancer. Taylor's face blanched. You want to question who loves me? I asked. You want to talk about undue influence? Then let's talk about the pressure I've felt for years to smile and nod while you slowly erase me from your life, Taylor. Let's talk about the emotional gymnastics I performed every time I was told I didn't fit into the image you wanted for your future. Taylor looked away. For the first time, Jonathan hesitated. I don't owe you anything, I said. Not a house. Not an explanation. And certainly not another chance to turn me into a punchline in your curated life. Taylor's voice broke. I just didn't think it would go this far. It did, I said. You brought a lawyer to my door.
You should cede.
I'm your daughter, she whispered. And I'm your mother, I replied. But motherhood doesn't come with a leash. It's not a lifetime contract to be used and dismissed. There was a long silence. Then Jonathan stepped forward, tone clipped. If you have any legal representation, I suggest contacting them. I smiled. Already did. He blinked. You did. I met with a firm last week, I said, stepping fully into the doorway now. They reviewed the transfer, the notarization, the will, and Miguel's standing. Everything is airtight. And if you try to drag this to court, I'll fight you. Taylor's jaw dropped. You'd really go that far? I didn't start this, I said. But I will finish it. I stepped back and began to close the door. Then paused. And Taylor, I said softly, just because you bring someone in a suit doesn't mean you're the one being wronged. I shut the door and locked it. That night, I found Miguel sitting on the back steps of the shed, head in his hands. He had heard. Somehow, I knew he would. I sat beside him, silent. After a moment, he spoke. They're going to try to destroy me. No, I said. They're going to fail. He looked up, and there was fear in his eyes. But beneath it, something else was forming. A flicker of resolve. You still want me to keep it? He asked. I nodded. More than ever. He exhaled. And for the first time, I saw it in him. The beginnings of a man no one would ever dismiss again. Not Taylor. Not her lawyer. Not the world. Because Miguel had something now he hadn't before. Not just a house. A fight worth staying for. The courtroom smelled like varnish and paper. Miguel sat beside me, his hands clasped so tightly I could see the whites of his knuckles. He wore a simple charcoal blazer I had bought him last fall when he started attending architecture conferences. It was a size too big back then. Today, it fit perfectly. Across the aisle sat Taylor.
Poised. Polished. Cold.
Her fiancé sat to her left, arms folded. Jonathan Knox, her lawyer, was to her right, flipping through a yellow legal pad like he was bored with the entire proceeding. Taylor didn't look at me once. This wasn't the kind of trial with a jury. Just a probate judge. An emergency petition for injunction. They were asking the court to freeze the deed transfer, to block Miguel from legally assuming ownership of the house. The motion rested on a single claim that I had been manipulated into giving away a major asset under undue influence. In other words, they were calling me old, confused, and weak. I should have been nervous. But I wasn't, because I had already lived through the worst betrayal I could imagine, watching my daughter look at me like I was nothing.
Compared to that,
A courtroom was just another room. Miguel hadn't wanted to speak. Not at first. I'm not good at that stuff, he'd told me the night before. I mess up under pressure. But I looked him straight in the eye and said, "You don't have to be perfect. Just be honest." He nodded. Now, here he was called to the stand by Jonathan Knox, whose smug tone wrapped around every word like a trap. "Mr. Santiago," he began, "how long have you known Mrs. Danner?" Miguel's voice was steady. 5 years. "And in those 5 years, how often would you say you visited her home?" Miguel paused. "Every week. Sometimes more." A few people murmured. Knox smiled faintly. "And when did Mrs. Danner first offer you her home?" "She didn't at first," Miguel said. "I found out she was updating her will during a visit. She told me later that week." "Did you suggest it?"
No.
"Encourage it?" Miguel looked straight ahead.
No.
"And yet," Knox said, walking toward the judge, "you accepted this enormous gift from a woman nearly 40 years your senior, who lives alone, with no other family support, and who, by your own admission, you see multiple times a week?" Miguel swallowed hard. "She's not alone." "Objection," my lawyer said softly. "Argumentative." "Sustained," said the judge. Knox pivoted. "Mr. Santiago, are you aware that Mrs. Danner has a history of anxiety and chronic fatigue?" Miguel looked confused. "I know she's had hard days." Knox smiled. "Would you describe her as vulnerable?" Miguel said nothing.
He looked at me.
And then, for the first time since he stepped into that courtroom, he let his voice rise. "I describe her as the strongest person I've ever met." Knox blinked. "Excuse me? You think you can paint this picture of her as some fragile old woman, sitting in her rocking chair being tricked into giving away her house," Miguel continued. "But that's not who she is. She's sharp. She's independent. And she didn't give me this house out of weakness. She gave it to me because she knew I'd take care of it, and because someone else made it clear they never would." The courtroom was silent. Miguel leaned forward slightly. "You want to talk about undue influence? Try being raised by someone who only shows up when it's time to take pictures. Try watching your mother be insulted in her own home by people who think they're too good for her." Knox's eyes narrowed. "So you're angry at Ms. Danner's daughter?" Miguel's voice lowered. "I'm protective of the woman who fed me when I hadn't eaten, who gave me a key when I didn't have a safe place to go, who never once made me feel like I was a burden." The judge tapped his pen. "Let's move on." But everyone had already heard what mattered. During recess, I stepped outside to breathe. The hallway outside the courtroom was cold, sterile, echoing with muted voices. That's when I saw her. Not Taylor. Not a friend. Natalie. My late husband's sister. The same woman who sat at the head of the Thanksgiving table and let people laugh when someone called my home a backwoods shed. She was leaning against the wall, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. Her coat was tailored, her heels high. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "I came to see the circus," she said dryly. "Didn't expect it to be quite so theatrical."
I didn't respond.
She looked me up and down. "You look calm." "I am." A small smirk played at her lips. "You always did keep your dignity, even when everyone else lost theirs."
"Not everyone," I said.
She nodded, then lowered her voice. "I told Taylor not to do this." That caught me off guard. "She came to me weeks ago," Natalie said. "Asked for my help, told me you'd lost it, that you were giving away the house to a stranger. I told her to let it go, that she'd pushed too far for too long, that you were owed your peace." You said that. She didn't listen. I stared at her. Why are you telling me this now? Natalie tilted her head. Because no matter what you think of me, I know what it's like to raise someone who turns around and treats you like you're made of glass and dust. I lost my daughter to money, too. It was the first honest thing I'd heard from her in years. I'm sorry, she added. I nodded. So am I. And then she surprised me. If you need someone to testify about who's been there for you, who's really taken care of that house, call me. I blinked. And for the first time in this whole ordeal, I felt a crack in the armor I'd spent months building around my heart. Because sometimes the people you least expect are the ones who finally see the truth. They called my name just after noon. The courtroom had thinned a little. Some of the reporters who had come for drama realized there was no scandal here, just a tired woman and a story nobody thought would matter. But it did. Because this wasn't just about a house. This was about who gets to be remembered and who gets quietly forgotten when their usefulness runs out. I stood, walked to the witness stand, and took my seat. My lawyer gave me a brief nod. Miguel, sitting near the back now, folded his hands in his lap. His eyes didn't leave mine. And across from me, Taylor sat stiff as a statue. She wouldn't meet my gaze. I placed my hand on the Bible, swore my oath, and took a breath. Then I looked directly at the judge. My name is Lorraine Danner, I said clearly. And I am here today not because I'm confused or manipulated, but because I'm finally clear on what I will no longer accept. There was a pause. The room seemed to still. The judge leaned forward slightly. I'm not a woman of big gestures, I continued. I've lived in the same house for over 30 years. I built most of it myself. Hammered drywall with swollen knuckles. Painted walls with my daughter's tiny handprints pressed beside mine. I glanced toward Taylor, but she looked down at her lap. I used to think that being a mother meant giving everything. All the time. Without question. I skipped meals so she could eat. I worked night shifts. I sold my wedding ring after my husband died just so Taylor could go to that summer dance camp she begged me for. She never knew that part. I didn't tell her. Because back then, I believed love was supposed to be quiet. I let the silence stretch. But over time, I started to feel like I was disappearing. Not because I stopped loving her, but because she stopped seeing me. She grew up and became embarrassed by the life we lived. She forgot what it cost to keep the lights on in a house she now calls a shack. The word hung in the air. I sat in my own living room and watched her laugh at everything I built. And I realized something. I paused. Love without respect isn't love at all. It's performance. A murmur from someone in the gallery. I looked straight at the judge now. Miguel came into my life with nothing. No expectations. No demands. Just kindness. He fixed what he could and listened when I didn't even know I needed to be heard. And when he called me family, it wasn't out of guilt. It was out of gratitude. I reached into my purse, pulled out an envelope, held it gently. This is a letter my late husband wrote before he died. To our daughter, originally. But I found it tucked in a box she never opened. In it, he asked her to protect me, to love me, to honor the sacrifices I made. I turned to Taylor now. Her eyes met mine for the first time in weeks. I gave you everything, I said. And when I needed just a little of it back, you gave me a lawyer. She flinched, just slightly. But it was there. This isn't about revenge, I said. This is about boundaries. About choosing myself after decades of being treated like a safety net instead of a person. I set the letter down on the stand. I wasn't erased. I was just quiet until now. When I stepped down, the room was silent. Even Knox didn't say a word. The judge called a recess. I walked into the hallway and sat on the bench just outside the courtroom, breathing in the cold air from the AC vents overhead. That's when Taylor followed me out. Her steps were slow. She stopped a few feet away and looked at me, not like a daughter, not like a plaintiff in a courtroom, but like someone who had just seen a version of her mother she never imagined existed. You kept that letter? She asked quietly. Yes. Why didn't you show it to me? Would it have mattered? She looked down. I don't know. There was a long pause. I thought you'd always be there, she whispered. No matter how far I pushed. I said. Until I wasn't. She nodded slowly, then asked something I didn't expect. Do you hate me? My throat tightened, but my answer came without hesitation.
No.
I hurt because of you, but I don't hate you. A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't brush it away. I don't know how to come back from this, she said. I stood, walked over, and placed the letter in her hand. I don't know if you will, I replied. Then I walked away, not to punish her, but to give her the silence she needed to grow in. The courtroom was full again. Word had spread, as it always does in small towns when something dramatic, something real, cracks the surface. But this time it wasn't about scandal. It was about a woman refusing to be invisible. The judge entered, glasses perched low, expression unreadable. He didn't shuffle papers. He didn't fumble with his words. He just leaned slightly forward and began to speak. This has been a difficult case. Not because of the legal arguments, which are, frankly, straightforward, but because of what's underneath them. Every breath in the room seemed to hold still. I have reviewed the deed transfer. I've reviewed the timeline, the will, the medical records. I've considered the character witnesses, the testimony, and most notably, the conduct of the parties involved. He glanced briefly at Taylor, then at me. What I see here is not a case of manipulation, but of reallocation. A woman decided to leave her legacy not to the person she gave birth to, but to the person who stood beside her when no one else would. A rustle of movement. Taylor looked down. Her fiancé stared straight ahead, face pale. The judge continued. There is no evidence of undue influence. There is no sign that Mrs. Danner was coerced or impaired in her judgment. Quite the opposite. Her decision was deliberate, reasoned, and, frankly, deserved. He tapped the bench once. Motion to void the deed transfer is denied. A wave of reaction rippled across the room. My lawyer let out a small breath of relief. Miguel, from 2 rows back, closed his eyes and bowed his head. And Taylor? Taylor didn't move. Not even an inch. Outside the courthouse, I didn't linger. I didn't want the whispers or the stares. I didn't want congratulations or pity. I just wanted my life back on my terms. But as I stepped into the sunlight, I felt a hand gently touch my arm. It was Miguel.
He didn't say anything.
He just handed me a key. The key to my own front door, the one I had given him weeks before.
Now, returned.
I know it's mine now, he said softly. But it will always be yours, too. I nodded. I know. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just stood there like two people who had been forged through fire, now solid in the quiet aftermath. That evening, I walked through the house again room by room. Not out of grief. Out of recognition. The floor still creaked near the kitchen where Taylor used to spill juice boxes. The windows still caught the afternoon sun like a secret being told to the walls. But something was different. It no longer felt like a space filled with ghosts. It felt clear. Then, as I stepped into Taylor's old bedroom, I saw something that stopped me cold. On the desk, near the edge, was the letter. The one from her father. She had taken it with her after court. But now it was back. Folded carefully. Weighted down by a photo frame. A photo of me and Taylor from years ago, before the designer dresses, before the lawyers, before the erasure. We were sitting on the porch steps, laughing. She was 8. I had grass stains on my jeans and dirt on my hands. And she looked at me like I was her whole world. On the back of the photo, in ink so fresh it hadn't fully dried yet, was a single line. I forgot who you were. I'm trying to remember. I stood there for a long time. Not crying. Not hoping. Just seeing, really seeing, the first glimmer of something real. Not redemption, but awareness. Later that night, I lit the fireplace for the first time in months. Miguel stopped by after dinner with lemon cake and 2 mugs of chamomile tea. We sat in the living room, the flames flickering, the air warm and silent. He looked around, then said, "You know what's funny?" "What?" "When I first came here, I thought this place was falling apart. Creaky stairs, cracked tiles, old paint. And now," he smiled, Now it feels like the only place that's ever felt right. I looked down at my tea. That's what Taylor never understood. This house wasn't just walls. It was memory, and it gave back to whoever respected that. He nodded. Then, from his coat pocket, he pulled out something small and placed it in my hand. A drawing. One he'd done years ago back at the library. A sketch of a house. Not a mansion. Not some Malibu dream. Just a warm little cottage. Labeled in soft pencil. Home. Below that, scribbled in block letters. For Lorraine. Who gave me more than a roof. I held the paper close. Then set it gently beside the fireplace, under the vase of tulips I had just bought that morning. The ones Taylor used to pick from the backyard. Spring came early that year. The snow melted before March, revealing the earth like something waking up after too long a sleep. Tulips started to peek through the frostbitten soil by the front steps, stubborn and brave. I spent my mornings on the porch again, sipping tea and letting the warmth of the sun touch my skin. Miguel had taken to dropping by twice a week, not out of obligation but habit. He brought stories from his job, drafts of architectural designs, sometimes just a fresh loaf of bread from the corner bakery. He was growing into his life, and he never once made me feel like I'd been left behind in mine. But Taylor? She hadn't called. Not once since the judge's ruling. Not after the letter was returned. Not after the photo. Not even after Natalie, of all people, sent me a short text that said simply, "You did the right thing." I didn't expect anything from Taylor. That part of me had finally gone quiet, but the absence still lived in the corners of the house. It echoed faintly in the hall outside her old bedroom. And even though I had no desire to reopen wounds that were just beginning to heal, there was something I needed her to know. So I wrote a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A letter. Handwritten. Folded. Sealed. I didn't tell her what she'd done wrong. She already knew. That was why she left the letter from her father on my desk. Instead, I told her a story about the first day she walked. How she fell down 5 times on the living room carpet and how I nearly cried when she finally made it from the coffee table to my knees, wobbling like a baby deer. I told her about her 6th birthday, when she made me sit on the kitchen floor in a tiara while she gave me a coronation made of cookie crumbs and glitter glue. And I told her about the night Gerald died. How I sat on her bed, smoothing her hair while she asked me over and over again, "But who'll take care of you now?" I wrote, "You used to ask that with so much fear in your voice. And for a long time, I didn't have an answer.
But now I do.
I will." That was all. No bitterness. No requests. Just memory. I sealed it, placed it in an envelope, and drove to the post office on a gray Tuesday afternoon. I didn't track it. I didn't expect a reply. Letting go, I've learned, means truly letting go. 2 weeks later, I found something in the mailbox. It wasn't a letter. It was a small, padded envelope. No return address. Just my name, written in handwriting I knew by heart. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was the locket I had once given Taylor when she graduated high school. A tiny gold oval. Nothing expensive. Just engraved with one word. Always. It used to contain a photo of the 3 of us, me, Taylor, and Gerald. I hadn't seen it in years. I thought she'd lost it, but now it was back. And this time, it had 2 photos. On the left, the original picture. On the right, the same picture I found left on the desk after court. The one where we were sitting on the porch steps laughing, young and messy and real. There was no note, just the locket. And for the first time since all this began, I felt something new. Not grief. Not anger. Not even forgiveness. Just space. The kind of space that love can breathe in again, slowly if you let it. That Sunday, Miguel and I took a walk through the neighborhood. He wore that same too-long coat, and I wore my gardening hat even though the sun barely broke through the clouds. We passed the old elementary school. Miguel stopped walking. He looked at the playground. Then back at me. "Do you think she meant it?" he asked. "Sending the locket?" "I don't know," I said truthfully. He nodded. "Maybe she's trying." I looked out across the street, where kids were chasing each other through puddles, soaked through but laughing like the rain made them lighter. She used to be soft, I said quietly. Not fragile.
But soft.
Like there was still room in her heart for wonder. Maybe she just got lost, he said. Maybe we all do. I turned to him. You didn't. He smiled faintly. I almost did. But you didn't, I said again. And that's why I chose you. We walked in silence the rest of the way home. Later that night, I sat at my desk, staring out the window at the wind moving through the trees. A soft tapping at the glass brought me back. It was the tulip stems swaying in their vase. Still alive. Still reaching. Still standing. Even when no one's watching. That's what healing is, I think. Not a grand gesture. Not an apology shouted across a courtroom. But a slow, stubborn blooming. The house smelled like lavender and lemon oil again. Not because I was expecting guests, but because I finally stopped living like I was waiting for someone to come back. The spring cleaning I once avoided had become a ritual. Not an attempt to erase the past, but to honor it. Every photo I dusted, every drawer I organized, every scuffed piece of furniture I left untouched, it all told a story I no longer needed anyone else to validate. I lived in this house. I had loved in this house. And now, I was free to live for myself in it. Miguel had been gone for 2 weeks. He left early one morning in mid-April, heading east for a 2-month architecture residency in Maine. When he got the acceptance email, he showed it to me with shaking hands. I can defer, he said immediately. It's not paid. I'll figure something else out. And I remember smiling, but not because I was proud of him, because I wasn't afraid anymore. Go, I told him. Go build something that lasts. He hugged me for the first time in months. A real hug. The kind you hold long enough for it to change your posture. He left me a set of spare keys and a short note that just said, "Keep the lights on." The following week, I repainted the guest room. It used to be Taylor's childhood bedroom.
For years, I left it untouched.
Frozen in time. Pink tulle curtains, scuffed white dresser, old ribbons and recital shoes collecting dust in the closet like artifacts from another world.
But now
it was becoming a reading room. Not a shrine. Not a museum. Just a place for me to sit in the light and enjoy the quiet I had once feared. I painted it a soft sage green. Peaceful. Grounded.
new.
And as I rolled the last coat over the corner of the far wall, I heard a knock at the front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Not the mail. Not the neighbors. And certainly not her. Taylor stood on the porch holding a small, brown cardboard box. No makeup. No pearls. Just a blue cardigan and jeans. And eyes that looked different. Older. Not in years, but in truth.
Hi, she said.
I opened the screen door. She didn't step in. She didn't assume. She waited. I gestured her inside. We sat at the kitchen table, the one with the worn edges and the history embedded in every scratch. She placed the box on the table and pushed it toward me. "What is it?" I asked. She swallowed. "Stuff I've been holding on to. From when I was little. Some drawings. Letters. I thought maybe they belonged here more than they ever belonged in a storage unit." I opened the box. On top, a folded paper crown made from gold foil and a sticker that read, "World's Best Mom." She looked down. "I know this doesn't fix anything." I nodded. "It's not supposed to," she added quickly. "I just wanted you to know. I remember." My throat tightened. She looked up again. "And I'm sorry I forgot." We sat in silence. Not the brittle silence of tension, but the heavy one that comes when two people are finally looking at the same truth and choosing not to run from it. "I didn't come to stay," she said, standing. "I just wanted you to know I'm not angry anymore." She walked to the door, then turned. "I got an offer to teach art at a school in Oregon.
Part-time.
But I think it'll be good for me." "That sounds like something you used to want," I said. Her smile was sad but soft. "I think I'm trying to remember who that girl was." I stepped forward. Pressed the locket she had returned gently into her hand. "No need to remember her," I said. "Just try to be her again." She nodded. Then she was gone. Later that evening, I stood in the doorway of the freshly painted reading room. I hadn't moved the box yet. I just let it sit there, open, the crown peeking out like a tiny monument to something both broken and whole. Outside, the tulips had bloomed fully. Not one, not three,
But a whole row.
the wind shifted the curtain beside me, and in that moment, I realized this wasn't a story of loss. It was a story of reclamation, of choosing to stay, of refusing to vanish quietly just because the world decided you were no longer useful. I sat down in my new favorite chair, the one with the velvet cushion and the wide arms perfect for balancing a book and a cup of tea. And as the sun dipped behind the hills, I whispered aloud, I built a house. But more than that, I built the life. And I didn't lose it. I found it again. In the quiet, in the truth, in the room I painted for myself.